Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's me again. As I was playing through Breath of the Wild and am now in the process of playing through Tears of the Kingdom, I noted that Link and Zelda are both religious, but also noted that not much detail is given to us regarding what their religion is. So today I'm going to do an analysis of the religion in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Before we get into it though, I want to make it clear why this is so interesting to me. I find the Hylian religion interesting because it is such a fundamental part of both Link and Zelda's characters. In Breath of the Wild's 13th memory, titled Slumbering Power, Zelda states, among other useful hints about this religion, that she has dedicated her entire life to prayer. Link also shows religious faith. In both games' mechanics, Link increases his health pool and stamina bar by praying. In this way, Link literally gets his strength from his religious faith, which is a trait that would normally be attributed to a fantasy paladin of sorts. So the more we know about Hylian religion, the more we know about Link and Zelda's worldview, ideals, and character. Okay, so before looking into Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, we need to do a quick history lesson on Legend of Zelda as a whole. In the earliest made Zelda games, the game was very deliberately Christian. This image featuring Link praying in a church with a crucifix comes straight out of the owner's guide for The Link to the Past. As more games were released, Hyrule became its own independent fantasy setting, and this was changed. Within the current canon and throughout most of the existing Zelda games, the Hylians' main religion was called the Church of the Golden Goddesses. However, in the 10,000 years between the previous canonical game and Breath of the Wild, the Church of the Golden Goddesses has more or less died out. It is also probably worth noting that two peoples known as the Sheikah and the Zonai made a number of shrines throughout Hyrule, which may have had religious purposes, but the purposes of these shrines has been more or less forgotten by the Hylian sages as the ages have passed, so they really don't figure into the current Hylian faith. So with this as backdrop, we can finally get into the analysis. What do we know about the Hylian religion? Well, like I said, the information's pretty sparse, but we have a few pieces of information. First of all, it is evident throughout Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom that worship has shifted from its previous three golden goddesses to the singular goddess Hylia, which means that the current Hylian religion is monotheistic. Hylia is a goddess that demoted herself to a human in the form of the first Zelda. We also see that the Triforce, a divine artifact, is still present, but it is less important than it once was. It is almost never mentioned directly in either game, but it's still definitely something that people are aware of, as it is used in iconography in a number of locations. Also, when Zelda uses the sealing power, the Triforce briefly manifests, so the Triforce is still used in small pockets throughout the kingdom in iconography and other symbolism. Another thing to note is the existence of the Springs of Courage, Wisdom, and Power. These locations appear to be pilgrimage sites of some sort, where one visits and prays. They notably all contain a statue of Hylia and are surrounded by a pool of water. It is also perhaps useful to note that the three springs bear a similarity to the three parts of the Triforce, which itself is divided into the Triforces of Courage, Wisdom, and Power. The last significant detail that I could find was in relation to some kind of spirit realm. Zelda mentions it offhandedly a couple of times in the aforementioned Breath of the Wild memory, Slumbering Power. She mentions that her grandmother heard voices from this spirit realm, and also says that she has tried calling out to the spirits tied to the ancient gods. Now we know from Breath of the Wild that spirits includes ghosts such as King Rome and the Champions, so these spirits tied to the ancient gods could easily be the long-dead sages that once guarded the Triforce in several of the past Zelda games. But we can't know that for sure, and they may be some other entity that we don't know about. Okay, so these are all the major cards on the table, or at least all the ones I could find. These are all the major, notable details that I could find in these two games. So now we're ready to get into theorizing as to what religions this may parallel in the real world and what other information we could potentially extrapolate from these facts. Please keep in mind that my conclusion is only one of the possible parallels you could draw. I've seen some articles and videos supporting various interpretations of this information, but there's one explanation that unites almost all of these details, and that is the theory that the game is going back to its roots. It's that the religion in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is inspired by Christianity, more specifically Catholicism. Here's why. Let's go through each of these pieces of information from the top and see how they parallel. First of all, worship has shifted towards Hylia. Hylia is a goddess who turns into a human, then goes into a kind of sleep/stasis for 100 years to hold back demise before reviving. This bears a notable similarity to Jesus becoming a man, dying to defeat sin and the grave, and raising from the dead. The parallel isn't perfect, but it's definitely notable. Second, and more interestingly, the Triforce, while less important, is still used as a symbol in iconography in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. The Triforce serves as a surprisingly good metaphor for the Holy Trinity. The Trinity is an idea that is almost impossible to represent with a metaphor, and most attempts to do so with physical objects has resulted in some sort of heresy or other. But the Triforce is actually a pretty good metaphor for how the three persons of the Godhead are one. The pieces of the Triforce even map roughly to the three persons, power being most similar to the Father, wisdom to the Son, and courage to the Holy Spirit. Even the titling of the Triforce seems similar, as its constituent parts are still referred to as Triforce, i.e. the Triforce of power, in a similar way to how the Father would be normally referred to as God the Father. In general, this overall idea that the Triforce is three parts but is still one artifact, and each one of those parts is wholly of that artifact, bears a very notable similarity to the Trinity. Third, the springs containing the statues of Hylia. This is where I get into why the Hylian religion is inspired specifically by Catholicism. In the Protestant Church, statues of a god would be considered pointless at best and idolatry at worst. But in the Catholic Church, they fall under the category of iconography and are just fine. For examples of this, look in a Catholic church. You are not unlikely to find a crucifix with a representation of Jesus on the cross, whereas you would never see a physical representation of Jesus in a Protestant church. The fourth thing is also Catholic specific. The spirits tied to the ancient gods, as I previously mentioned, are likely to be the sages of ages past. We don't know that for sure, but we don't have a lot of information, and this is the best guess I've got. If these spirits are some other kind of person or celestial creature, then we don't have anything to go on. However, if they are the sages, then we have another piece of information to build off of, because Hylians are calling out to these ancient sages, and this may be similar to the veneration of the saints, which is another specifically Catholic thing. All this information has pretty well convinced me that current Hylian religion in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is not necessarily based off of, but is at least heavily inspired by Catholic Christianity. Anyway, that's the video, and I'm bad at conclusions, so I'll just stop myself here before I ramble on pointlessly.